my maturity with God to race ahead in powerful moments in his presence. I want desperately to enter God's presence, and then on the other side of that mountaintop experience to somehow find myself closer to his heart and to his love and to his will. But the truth is, those moments don't mature you and I. Those moments are incredibly powerful, like the ones we just had, and boy, can Ellie sing or what? Good grief. There were boys lined up in back with rings ready, and Greg roughed them all up, said, sorry guys, she's taken. We want so desperately, I want so desperately, those moments to shape me and to change me, and while they have impact on my heart, and I hope for you, they inspire you to go after God. Moments in God's presence, powerful experiences with God do not mark maturity. It could be likened to walking into a crowded party and seeing an old friend that you've not seen in some time, and from across the room you lock eyes because you know them and you wave. And what a shame it would be to merely be in their presence and not find your way across the room to actually be with them. And so often you and I settle for that, oh, there's God over there, and we wave at him and we're in his presence, and then we leave the party and yet we never had a conversation. Men, especially the married guys or in relationship guys in the room, I know you have done this. You've connected with an old friend like me, and you've come home to your significant other and she's asked you questions. Like, how big was the baby, and how long, and how heavy, and is it a boy or a girl? And you go, I don't know, he had a baby. Am I supposed to ask for these details? Yes, the answer is. Of course. I want those moments to mature me, but the reality is, and the truth of the matter is, that moments do not mature you and I. It's the movement that happens after the moment that matures you. See, the moments are a powerful catalytic experience in yours and my relationship and maturity with God, but moments alone in God's presence don't leave you and I any more mature in our walk with him than when we entered the moment. We just have another moment to tally on the wall of something that we saw or that we experienced, or an emotion that moved us, or a word we heard God speak to us. But if not acted on, we're just left like the friend who waved at an old friend across the room but never took the time to connect at the party. Last week we dissected God's will for your and my regret, and this week, today, we talk about the most challenging season of your life and mine. And the most challenging season of your life and mine to navigate is not your past and dealing with regret, while that is powerful and important to walk through. The truth is today, this day right here, not in a general sense, but Sunday, September 20, whatever it is. Thank you. Today provides you and I more challenges than any other day you're prepared to face. You will face all kinds of things in this very day, and the truth of the matter is this, that if today brings you no challenges in stepping closer to God, the reality is you are not stepping closer to God. If you don't lay your head down in bed each night, maybe it doesn't work quite like this for you, but if throughout your day you're not asking the Lord or crying out to God, going, God, how do I get through this? You're getting through it without God. Because I don't know about you, I've got a pretty blessed and charmed life, and yet it's still, every single day I go, ooh, that one. Okay, Lord, get me ready, right? That speed limit, right? That law, that child. It's in the little nudges closer to God's love and his story, closer to his will. It's in these maturing moments, little by little by little, that you and I are drawing closer to God. Certainly our past plays a role, and we delved into that last week. But today, in terms of nudging closer to God, nudging closer to his will in your life, today will bring more challenges than you even recognize. We walk in this truth, though, from James chapter 4, that if we draw close to God, he will in turn draw close to you. That he stands ready to draw closer to you than you even sent him to be. So that's where we're going today. Before we get too far into it, I want to say a few welcomes. A mighty welcome to moms who join us across the hall in our living room, taking care of your little ones. Moms, you do the hardest job in the world, especially dealing with little ones. We're so grateful that you got up this morning, and you might even be thinking, why am I getting up and showering, or at least spraying perfume on to drive to church and watch this on screen? And there's power in being together. So thanks for being with us. For those online, we're stoked that you're along for the journey. If you're in the room today, you are, in fact, in the room today, in case you're having some existential crisis. You're here. By the way, this is real. If you're new with us, grab that brochure out in the seat pocket. It looks like the one behind me on screen, and I think will help be a tool in navigating your next steps with disciples, help you dissect what we're all about, what we're up to, and we'd love to journey with you in life. If you've got a Bible, turn with me to Judges chapter 6. It's where we're going to find ourselves today. And if a Bible is not nearby, I bet your smartphone is. Go right onto your app store right now. You'll have just a few minutes to do it, and it'll be plenty of time. Go to your app store and download this app called YouVersion. It will provide for you access to dozens and dozens of different translations of the Bible right at your fingertips. Everywhere you go, you'll have God's truth with you. I'll be using the New Living Translation for the vast majority of today, so if you want to follow along in that translation, you go right ahead. Otherwise, find one that you like and have it nearby. Judges chapter 6 is where we'll be today. But before we take another minute towards where I think God would lead us this morning, would you pray with me and for me and all of that? Lord Jesus, thanks for what you have in store in these moments that follow. We know that they are divine. We know that they are sovereign moments that you set apart a long time ago and designed each of us to be part of this moment. And yet I'm keenly aware, God, today, maybe more than normal, that this moment will mean very little in my life and the life of others if the movement that follows doesn't happen. If we don't take a step, if we don't nudge closer. So move us in these moments. We trust you, God, and where our trust is weak or failing, meet us there, Father, and bring us along. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Horatio Spafford lost just about everything he owned, everything that was dear to him in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. It had been a really, really rough couple of years for Horatio. As the fire burnt everything he owned, he was still mourning the loss of his one and only son who had died just 12 months previous to scarlet fever. And in a very Job-like kind of existence, Horatio looked out at everything that belonged to him in possession, and it was all lost. He had doubled down on the real estate market in those late 1800s, and as Chicago was this booming and growing city, every dollar that he had accumulated, he would pump back into real estate. An attorney by trade, but really a real estate mogul by practice. When the Great Fire of Chicago happened, he was reminded once again that he had no insurance. He'd never taken out an insurance policy on anything. And while he was left to mourn the death of his son, his one and only son, he now was left absolutely penniless. In a blink, it all went up in smoke. He tried for a few years to put his life back together and to get his business and entrepreneurial interest spinning again. But for as any of you who've ever lost everything and built back, you know it takes more than a couple of months to build that momentum back up. And so finally, 2 years later, in 1873, Spafford loaded his wife and his 4 remaining children, all girls, on a ship headed for England. A friend of his by the great name of D.L. Moody was going to be in England and around Europe preaching, and he thought the best thing that we could do is get my girls out of the city for a year or so, and I'll just really, really focus on my work and try and build back up our business and get them over to England. And so over to England they headed. Maybe you're familiar with the story, but months later he received a one-line telegram from his wife as she reached England. And the telegram read very simply, saved alone, what shall I do? News spread pretty quickly thereafter that in the journey across the Atlantic, their ship holding 225-ish people had crashed into another very large iron ship and had been sunk. And all 4 of his daughters had drowned as mom tried to save them. So here Spafford sits in Chicago, penniless, broke, trying to rebuild his business, still mourning the loss of his only son, and now rushing to get across the Atlantic on a long journey as he thought, looking out at the very waters that claim the lives of his 4 daughters. On the journey across the Atlantic, he had what you would assume was a lot of time to be alone with his thoughts, to reflect on where he stood with God, to think about his own faith, and the loss of all 5 of his children, and the state that he would find his wife in when he arrived, and now how do I make money? How do I provide for my family? As the ship journeyed across the Atlantic, he wrote some pretty famous words that if you've spent any time around the church, you'll recognize. The words are this: when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. I didn't know the story behind that traditional hymn until just the other day, researching for this talk and thinking about as he goes across the ocean and looking at the sea billows that roll, the very sea that claimed his daughters' lives, and it is well with my soul. There's something going on in the souls of women and men like you and I that are altogether different than mine. I don't know if God claimed all of my children's lives and Jen wrote me from far away and said, come and get me. I don't know what to do. I don't know, guys. I can't promise you that on that airplane that the words that I would pen would be something along the lines of, no matter what comes my way, God, my soul's okay because I'm found in you. But see, this is the nature of nudge in you and I. This is the nature of these monumental moments that you and I face all the time, and the incremental moments that you and I will face even this very day, where we are provided an opportunity by God to say, will you take one step closer to me, or will you claim one more step of ground for you? But there is no in between. In the wise words of, I believe it was Joe Dirt, if you ain't winning, you're losing, right? Maybe it was Ricky Bobby. And this idea spiritually that if you and I are not taking ground and moving closer to the heart of God, the only other scenario you and I can live is one where we are at the very least gently backing away from God. And saying, God, I got this. You stay there. You stay across that room. Hi, how you doing? Good, yeah, good to see you. Nope, stay there. Right? I'm going to the restroom. I'll meet you later. I know you've done it, especially the ladies who are newlyweds. You've all done that. I know it. Look with me at Judges chapter 6. Because I believe that the Lord would have for you and I to gather some tools today as we seek to nudge closer to Him and not simply take the bait and allow for our faith to be marked by moments that we write on a chalkboard, that moment and this moment and this moment, but that our faith would be one that we see progress because of those moments, certainly, but not just the moments. Chapter 6, verse 1 of Judges. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight, and so the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains, caves, and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, marauders from Midian Amalek and the people of the east would attack Israel, camping in the land and destroying crops as far away as Gaza. They left the Israelites with nothing to eat, taking all the sheep, the goats, the cattle, and the donkeys. And these enemy hoarders, coming with their livestock and their tents, were as thick as locusts. They arrived on droves of camels, too numerous to count. And they stayed until the land was stripped bare. So Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites, and then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. And when they cried out to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to Israel and said, "This is what the Lord has said. I brought you up out of slavery in Egypt. I rescued you from the Egyptians and from all who oppress you. I drove out your enemies and I gave you their land. I told you, I am the Lord your God. You must not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you now live. But you have not listened to me." So we find Israel, God's chosen nation, these people dearly loved by God, the scriptures tell us over and over and over again. And in their rear view mirror, in the very core of their genetic makeup, is this reality that their ancestors had come out of slavery in Egypt. They've already lived this way once before, where they were held captive. And so God brings them through that. I mean, it took 40 some odd years to bring them through it, but God leads them through that process out of Egypt and into this land. And then they arrive at this land and God says, "Okay, here's the deal. I am the Lord your God. I have always been for you. I am with you. Don't worship their false gods." And they did it anyway. So we arrive at Judges, and we see this pattern that has happened in humankind from the beginning of creation. You know, see, Israel didn't start all this, right? God set up a plan for our relationship with him to nudge in the garden. And he said to Adam and Eve, he said, "Listen, you've got complete intimacy with me. You have complete access." In fact, Genesis chapter 1 says God would walk around the garden with them. Can you imagine that? "Hey God, did you water the tomatoes today?" "I did, in fact. A mist fell last night. Isn't that rad?" "Yes, it is very good. I like." They had this relationship with God, and yet they said, no. The only boundary, the only guardrail you have given us, God, is do not eat of that. Well, what could happen? They broke the plan God had. And then they get to Abraham. And God says to Abraham, right? "You're my guy, Abram. I got you, buddy. I love you. I've got a promise for your heart. I'm going to give you his son. It's going to happen." And he goes, "Let me help you out, God. You stay over there, God. I got this." Remember Abram's bright idea? Can you imagine that conversation with his wife? "Hey, hon, I've got an idea." This is very El Dorado County of him to do this. If you got that, you're in trouble. We need to talk afterwards. I'd like for you to go, and I'm going to have a son a different way. God brings it back together. And then comes Moses. And this story goes on and on and on and on. I want to point out this problem that you and I face as we deal with our today. And it's real, and it's important that you and I exist in the reality that actually is, I think is the way that the great Dallas Willard would have said it, that we have to accept reality as it actually is. So when I look in the mirror and I see a guy who's gained 20 pounds, thank you, please don't mention it. I have to accept that reality as it actually is. And when I try to put on the jeans I wore last year, I have to accept the reality as it actually is, that they do not any longer fit me, right? This is the reality that is actually happening. The big problem with my past and with yours is that oftentimes we face a new challenge And the reality when we face the new challenge is that you and I are the same person that was defeated in the last challenge. And so we face a new challenge. Maybe it's a new relationship, and we start to hit the same bumps we hit in the last relationship. We go, why is this always happening to me? Why do I always pick them like this? Guess what? It's not them, it's you, right? You get into a new job and you go, man, I hated my old job, and now I've got a great new job, and I'm gonna love it. And then you find you hate the new job just like you did the last job. And you know why? Because the only thing that's the same in the new job is you. You're the same person that came from the last job. The problem is willpower is just simply not enough for you and I. We've been trying our entire adult lives. You've been trying to, I'm going to read my Bible more. I'm going to be less angry. I'm going to drive slower. I'm going to scream at my kids less. I'm going to just do it. It's just going to happen. And I'm going to start on Monday. And then Monday comes around, and the reality is willpower is just not enough. There's something else going on in your heart and mind that gets trumped by willpower every time. That the reality being, the problem you and I face is that your past defeats will mirror your current challenges. Until you and I actually become different people, until we actually change and enter the transformational process of nudging closer to Jesus every day, we take the same us that were defeated in that challenge and we bring them to the new challenge and hope something will change. Hope that the new boss will be better, or that the new relationship will go smoother, or that the new paycheck will somehow go further. But we're the same people. Your past defeats will mirror current challenges. If you're taking notes, write down, my past defeats are going to mirror my current challenges. My last boss was not a bigger jerk than my new boss. It's me. This is one of the greatest problems in life, quite frankly, and part of why we hope that the next mountaintop experience down the road will somehow magically change us. If I just sing that song a little louder, if I just pray a little bit longer, if the Holy Spirit just moves me a little more powerfully, I will somehow be a different person on the backside. And the reality is, you're inspired to pursue a different person on the backside in Jesus. But if you and I don't pursue him, we just circle back the same mountain again and we are left unchanged. You and I have to nudge. We've got to change. The addiction is still there. The infidelity remains. The rage has not left your heart. This reality of actually following Jesus in a transformational way must be what drives you and I. To conquer new challenges that would previously have resulted in defeat, you and I must become different. We've got to transform. And this is the beauty of nudge, that God is not waiting for some magical wand to wave on you to lift that. God is giving you and I all the tools to take our next logical step toward Jesus, and towards freedom, and towards wholeness, towards grace, and towards love. And he doesn't wag his finger at you and I when we are far. He waves his finger, come closer. We have to rewrite that in our hearts. Continue on with me. So Israel's in a bit of pickle, right? This is not a good scenario. Then the angel of the Lord came, verse 11. Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." Mighty hero, the Lord is with you. And let me unpack this for just a second, because this is really key. If it's easy to miss, and I've missed it before too, but here we have Gideon at the bottom of a wine press threshing wheat. Now, I don't know anything about threshing wheat, but I have Wikipedia, so I know a little something about it now. Apparently, when you thresh wheat, you grab a bundle of wheat, and if you've threshed wheat before, please don't corner me after service. Go, well, actually, use your left hand, not your right. The big idea is this. You shake this stuff on the ground, and you whack it on the ground, usually on a big, flat space of either clay or rock, ideally to keep it clean. And you whack this stuff, and the chaff rises up and just turns into this mess of dust. I mean, for those of you with allergies, you're having PTSD right now just thinking about it. And this chaff just goes everywhere and just creates kind of this cloud of chaff. And you keep whacking this wheat on the ground until all the chaff is removed, and what you have left is the wheat, or I guess it's a grain of some sort, right? And then you take your gluten-free whatever, and you don't eat it, right? Because it finds y'all up. But there's some gluten-free people in the room. All right. So you do this out in the open so that as this dust sort of settles, the wind blows away the chaff. And they said that the best day to separate the wheat from the chaff was actually a windy day. And you try to get upwind, and as you whack this on the ground, the wind will just carry away the chaff, and it's just kind of this beautiful thing. And then that chaff actually will oftentimes go to fertilize the crop, and it's a real beautiful cyclical thing. So here we have Gideon in the bottom of a wine press, in a cave, probably, most likely, down in a rock where it's cool and it's damp to store wine. We like this place. And he is smacking this wheat, and the dust is everywhere. This is what fear does for you and I. We talked last week about how our regret leaves us living in a fog. But so does fear. Fear leaves you and I living in a cloud of wheat and chaff. You can't see your way out. And here he tries to separate the wheat from the chaff, fearful that the Midianites are after him. And up above somewhere sits a tree, and the angel of the Lord sits there. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." Scared for your life, hiding under the bed from the monster who's going to get you, the angel of the Lord crawls under the bed with you, taps you on the nose, and says, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." This is your life and mine. God sees us backing away from him. And he's like, "Hey, angel, go around the backside." And as we back away from God, the angel of the Lord taps us on the shoulder, and we look around and go, "Oh." And he goes, "Hey, you're a hero. That God is with you." You go, "Wait, what?" So he's not waving my finger? I can't see him anymore. I'm so far. No, he's waving you closer. Leave the wine press. Mighty hero, the Lord is with you. If you're parenting a kid, whether that kid is 2 months old or 35 or 55, but would you just commit in your heart this week, if the Spirit moves you, would you just commit in your heart this week at some time to tell your child that they're a hero and that the Lord is with them? Because parents, our kids spend so much of their time feeling completely powerless. And I get to talk to them all the time, and I got a whole fleet of them at home. And I can't tell you how much of my time with my kids is just trying to pour into them that you're a hero. They need to hear that from you. They need to hear that the Lord is with them. You and I need to hear it too, but they need to hear it. Mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Second piece in this, if you're taking notes, is that God is nearer than you think. God is even nearer than you think. He's closer than you ever imagined. And you may come into this joint today and feel 1,000,000 miles away from God, and you're just here because somebody's been inviting you forever. Or you've had that nagging thought in your head that I should draw near to God again. And I just want to remind you that God is nearer than you think. He's so much closer than you imagine. And that finger that you think is waving at you, there's just so much wheat and chaff floating around your fearful cave right now that you can't see that it's not God's finger wagging at you, it's God's finger inviting you. and saying, come on in. The writer of Hebrews tells us that every time we go into the presence of God, he meets us with grace and mercy. So we can go in with confidence, knowing that's the way we'll be met by God. God is nearer than we think. Here Gideon hides, desperately threshing wheat, using all the wrong space in hopes of being victorious in life, in hopes of getting the next meal, in hopes of providing for his family, but he's hiding in fear. And he pours out his heart in desperation. Which I'm still convinced that he didn't know this was an angel of the Lord, because look at the way he responds to him in verse 13. He says, "Sir," Gideon replied. You just thought it was some guy, I think. It's just your pastor talking, but that's the best assumption I can make. "Sir, if the Lord is with us, why has all of this happened to us? And why are all the miracles our ancestors told us about, where are they? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites." And the Lord turned to him. So now it shifts, right? It went from an angel of the Lord tapping, and in that time, if you play out the analogy with me a little bit, I'm sure the theology's kind of bad here, but hang with me, it'll be fun. The angel of the Lord taps on the shoulder, and in the meantime, God is drawing near to Gideon and come over to him, and now Gideon turns around and goes, "Oh, it's God," and it's God speaking to him. And he says, "Then the Lord turned to him and said, 'Go with the strength you have and rescue the Midianites. I am sending you.'" Go with the strength you have and rescue the Midianites. I am blessed to lead the kind of church where you trust me enough to tell me your stories. And I usually don't tell them from here without asking you first. And if I have done that, I'm sorry. Well, I hear your stories all week long, and I hear the obstacles you're facing, and most of the time you're wiser than I am to navigate them, and the best I can do is say, I'm praying for you, and if there's any resource I can send you, I obviously will, but most of you are facing monstrous challenges. I get that. The land had been stripped bare for Gideon. His enemies were on every side and came like locusts. I think your life feels that way sometimes. You see the walls closing in. Age is closing in on you. Retirement's closing in on you. Your kids are closing in on you. Your job is closing in on you. You're wondering if this current job you're working could be a career. Your marriage is closing in on you. And I believe with all my heart that the Lord nudges close to you and taps you on the shoulder and says, "Go with the strength you have. I'm sending you." You get this other picture of something real similar to this when the Lord meets with Elijah, and Elijah falls down. Maybe you're familiar with the story, and he swoops down into this tree and goes, "God, I've had it. I can't do it anymore. This crazy woman is chasing me. Just kill me now." And God says the same thing almost verbatim to him. He says, "Get up, eat some food, because I've got something new for you. Go with the strength you have." The third piece to point out this morning is God sends you equipped to conquer today. Yeah, I know, I get it. You're not equipped to conquer tomorrow. I know, because neither am I. I'm looking at the challenges facing me in the next 3, 4, 5 months in my life, and probably like you, Christmas is around the corner, and I know all of you have saved that money diligently all year long, and it's in your envelope, right? Well, all right. Dave Ramseyites in the room. There's a few of you, I know. It's awesome if you have, but I know that you feel the walls closing in on you in 6 months. And as a vision guy, on the Strengths Finder thing, on that psychometric that's so famous in business world right now, one of my top strengths is futuristic. I get the future. I like the future. I like to talk about the future. I'll tell you what, today freaks me out. There's a lot of days when I look at what's before me that day, I go, "God, I got no clue here." And I know you're feeling the same. I'm having conversations with my kids right now. Some of them are in the room, so they're going to now have a leg up on me. But I'm having conversations with my kids right now in their life where I'm like, I wonder if they realize how clueless I am right now. Do you have these conversations yet? Maybe if you don't have kids yet or yours are out of the house, you have employees or people at work, and you're like, do you think they believe any of this line of fill in the blank that I'm about to feed them? You kind of back out of whatever room you're in and go, well, nobody called me on it, so I guess I'm going to run with that. I don't say any of that to make light of it, but I do say that intentionally because I know you're feeling it too. I know you are. You talk to me. You tell me. This overwhelm is real. You and I have made much too much of the future. Retirement plans are awesome. Putting away money in your 401k, great plan. I would not negate any of that. But what I am saying is you and I are spending way too much time thinking about 5 years from now and way too little time thinking about right now. What do you want me to do right now, God? Because you've sent me as a missionary. It says right here, right? It says right in the text, the Lord turned to him and said, go with the strength you have. I'm sending you. Go with the strength you have. Send. The Apostle Paul wrote a letter to his friends in Rome, and in the context of that letter, he talks about how deep and how great the love of God is in their life. And in the midst of that, he says, if God is for us, who could ever be against us? Who could ever be against us, since he did not spare even his own son, but gave him up for us all? Won't he also give us everything else? If God gave us his very own son to ransom our lives from distance with him, won't he give us what we need to navigate today? And to not just survive today, but to be a miracle to our world today, to carry forward the hope and the peace and the love and the grace of Jesus. Proverbs 3 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. And don't lean on what you know, but in everything acknowledge God, and he'll straighten out your path. God is for you and I. And God's will for you and I today is to stand up with the strength we have and serve the Lord the way that he would invite us to be. I don't know exactly where you find yourself with God this morning, but I know this. I know the frustrations. I know the doubts. I know the lacking trust you're feeling at work or at home or even in your church life has way less to do. All of those doubts and frustrations have way less to do with those environments and way more to do with your ability or inability to take your next step with Jesus. And it's amazing how those frustrations and how those doubts and how those worries about today fall right away when your focus and mind is clearly on taking a next step toward Jesus. I want to invite the band to join me up as we wrap up our time together today. You have a step to take with God today. You do. This is not a throwaway Sunday. There are no throwaway Sundays, but today, as much as ever, you have a step to take with God. And if I was bolder, I would say, all right, everybody repeat after me, right? I have a step to take with God, because we all have a step. It's as simple as ABC. I get that living it out is far more complicated than ABC, but the next step and moving your foot from there to there is as simple as admitting that you have a step to take. Believing that the only step that will make a difference is towards Jesus. And then committing to take the next step after that. That's the life God's marked for us. Whether you feel 1,000 miles from God or you feel very near his heart, that's the line that God puts us on. I encourage you to take that next step with Jesus. I encourage you to walk with him today. Maybe today's the first day ever that you say, I'm going to walk with Jesus. And you turn your life over to him and the leadership of your life. Please let us know if you've done that. Some of you are doing that in our midst and we don't find out until after. Let us know. We want to celebrate with you. But whatever your step might be with God, use your feedback card, write it down. There's something happens when we anchor that on paper. You don't have to turn it in if you don't want. Don't write your name on it if you'd like us to pray for you, but at least write down, man, my next step is this. Because we all have a step to take. When Horatio Spafford reached England to a mourning and sad wife, he and she stood at a very important crossroads in their life. All 5 of their children had been killed and taken. They were penniless and broke, and now they were a long, long way from home. And they stood at a crossroads where their life could have gone a number of different ways. Certainly they could have dug into bitterness and resented God, or questioned the decisions, or even split their relationship like so many of you and I have seen happen over the years, and blamed one another for what happened. They could have done all that, or they could have just doubled down the way they had before and said, okay, well, we're just going to double down now, and we're going to earn more money, and we're going to work harder, and we're going to build up our wealth again, and we're going to mask all of the pain that we're feeling with earthly pleasure. The story is a pretty incredible one, the way it went. Because God had not allowed them the life that they had hoped, and I'm sure that they dealt with doubt and resentment and difficulty in that. But instead of letting that overtake them, they took their next steps with Jesus each step of the way. And over the next many months, they continued to draw near to God and ask God the questions of not just why, but of what. Not just why has this happened, but what would you have us do next? And just a couple of years later, they found themselves having gathered 13 adults. And by this time, a couple of years later, they had had 3 more children. And 13 adults and those 3 children moved to Jerusalem and decided that they would set up a soup kitchen and feed those that are hurting. They said, we've been there. We've been hungry and penniless and broke. And they set up soup kitchens. And over the course of the next few years, and I believe it was 1817, at the beginning of the First World War and all the way through the First World War, they were the only people in Jerusalem, the only ministry that would serve food to Muslims, Jews, and Christians alike. And in fact, the church that he was a leader in renounced him and called him a heretic and terrible things because he would love Muslims and Jews and Christians at the same time. And he doubled down and he said, no, we're not just going to feed them. They set up orphanages. They set up clothes closets for the next several years of their life until the Lord took him home at the age of 60. They made a huge difference in the lives of those suffering from World War I. God's got a similar plan for you. In the midst of what you face today, God says, will you take the next step towards my will for your life? Because it's an impact you could never imagine and never see. And even those of you with great vision who say, no, I really feel like I heard from the Lord and my life's supposed to be there. Well, guess what? There is not even where God would love to take you. Why don't you stand with me and let's worship. God had huge plans for the Spaffords, and he's got huge plans for you. Lord Jesus, we love you. We claim you as our own and us as